And in next year, right? It's 25 years for the Smithsonian Latino Center
25
celebrating.
years. Yeah, there was a report in 1994 called Willful Neglect, and it was a very damning report that was commissioned by the Smithsonian itself, and you have to hand it to the institution for, doing it, right? Commissioning the report, which revealed that there was so little done. I mean, the name says it all, willful neglect. And so the Smithsonian said, well, that's not a good report. What are we going to do about it? And so the next year, and years following, 1997, a couple years after, 3 years after, the Latino Center was established. And our role really is to ensure Latino presence within the institution, which is a monumental task because we're talking about 19 museums, soon to be 21 museums, 9 research centers, a national zoo, a major festival on the mall, a recording label, et cetera. So, that's a lot of territory to cover, a lot of content to explore, to research, to do exhibitions around, to collect about, to program educational and public programs, to publish and so forth, and to also use the digital world as a way to disseminate this information and this experience. The Smithsonian itself is 175 years old, and the mission remains the same after 175 years, and that's very simply an institution to increase and the increase in diffusion of knowledge. Pretty simple. And so, following up and executing that mission is our task. And so, this gallery that we're building at the National Museum of American History and the museum that will follow later are all about that: the increase and diffusion of knowledge and examining the American experience through a Latino lens, right?
Yeah,
American
I have a
history.
question.
Go ahead.
But forgive me. No, I just like point of personal privilege. One of the things that I find you said, Latinos are diverse. We have so many different kinds of history. I'm Puerto Rican. You're Chicano. Like, how do you thread that all together into a museum and sort of weave through principal narratives? Like, I'm thinking the Museum of African American History and slavery sort of being this central theme, right? What's the central theme of the American Latino?
I think that's to be determined. I would say, just off the top of my head, it could be migration and immigration. It could be movement, right? That could shape it. Obviously slavery is a narrative because who knows? I mean, given my background, my ethnic background, I could have come from enslaved people myself, right, in Mexico, right? But I'll just leave that to more research I have to do. But to your point, how do we include everyone's story? I'll tell you, this first exhibition that we're putting in the Molina Gallery is entitled Presente, a Latino History of the United States. And we take it all the way from indigenous periods all the way through to contemporary. And we highlight critical episodes like the one we were talking about earlier, the US-Mexico War. We also talk about another period which is near and dear to your heart, the Spanish-American War of 1898, and where the United States really exerts its imperial vision and assumes control over Puerto Rico. And of course, Puerto Rico continues to be possession of the United States, the liberation of Cuba. The Philippines were also taken as a sort of a prize as well in that war that was fought between Spain and the United States. So we take on major episodes. We look at the issue of immigration. One of the most exciting objects in the exhibition is a balsa, a Cuban raft, right? These are these ramshackle rafts that were put together with styrofoam and duct tape and God only knows what else that Cuban refugees got in and quote unquote sailed to Florida and made it here. And so it's a very dramatic piece. It's very moving because you understand in just that one object what these folks went through to leave what was an undesirable situation in Cuba and make their way to the United States. And so we're using objects and stories to really cover a broad swath of Latino history. Are we going to miss some chapters? Absolutely. There's just no way within 4,500 square feet. I mean, it's hard enough to do that in a big museum, right? Like you mentioned, African American history and culture. But can you imagine trying to do that in a 4,500 square foot space? Wow. But we're doing the best we can. Subsequent exhibitions, we're going to go into deeper dives and specific subject matter. Like the next exhibition will really look at Latino youth movements, right? The Chicano movement, the Young Lords, efforts in, let's say, Miami, for example, and their battle against English-only laws and things of that nature. So and these subsequent exhibitions, and when the museum is open, we'll have an opportunity to do these really deeper dives into specific subject areas, which I think will be a welcome and fascinating process.